Hello, it's Yoli Medina. So I did go back and I went to see the documents to find out the status of the IGG discovery and whether that had been turned over. And it looks like it has. And I'm just going to show you the documents that I found. I know it's hard to keep track of. So the first one I'm sharing here is the order addressing the IGG DNA and order for in-camera review. So this was filed on October 25th, 2023. This was almost a year ago. So they were ordered to produce all the IGG DNA material, and the judge was going to look at it in camera. And that just means that he was going to look at it without anybody present in chambers and decide what, if anything, the defense is entitled to. So after that, there was a notice of in-camera submission. This was on November 30th, 2023, where they submitted the IGG information that they had in their possession, custody, or control to the court for the in-camera review. And then what happened, I guess it was turned over. Whatever was allowed to be turned over was turned over. And then it looks like Ann Taylor filed a request, a 15th supplemental request for discovery. And that was for, it says, please take notice that the undersigned, pursuant to Rule 16 of the Idaho Criminal Rules, the 4th, 5th, 6th, 8th, and 14th Amendments to the Constitution of the United States, and Article 1, Section 1, 2, 13, and 17 of the Constitution of the State of Idaho, requests discovery and inspection of all materials discoverable by defendant per ICR Rule 16b 1 through 8, and the aforementioned constitutional provisions, including but not limited to the information, evidence, and materials outlined in Exhibit N. So apparently what was produced was Exhibit N, and it was an outline of materials, and then it reads, Exhibit N relates to the sealed IGG information and will not be attached to this pleading. Defense counsel will hand deliver a copy of Exhibit N to Bill Thompson and/or Ashley Jennings on 3/28/24 and will provide a copy to Judge on 4/4/24. So this was a request to have Exhibit N, the information on Exhibit N, to be produced. And we don't know what that is because it's sealed. So then the next thing I find is this. It is the state's response and supplemental responses to defendant's request for discovery. And this was filed on the due date that the prosecution had to turn over everything they have. So this would have been the summary that, if you watched the other video, the summary that Bill Thompson talked about that Ashley Jennings produced for the court is a summary of everything that's been produced. And what it has is, and I highlighted it. Oh, hold on. There's a page that's blank. So beginning here at the end, the state submits the attached Exhibit P in response to defendant's 17th supplemental request for discovery. So they talk about the 17th supplemental request for discovery, and then it says, the state notes it has previously complied with the defendant's discovery request pursuant to the court's order related to the defendant's supplemental requests 3 and 15, in parentheses, IGG related materials. And then it goes on, the state incorporates the following responses as set forth at this point. And there's a whole summary of a bunch of stuff that was produced. So based on what the state is saying, they are saying that they did produce everything. And we haven't heard any objection or any other supplemental requests. There might be more, but at least as of the time that the defense was supposed to produce everything over to the prosecution was supposed to produce everything over to the defense on September 4th. The state is representing that it produced the IGG materials. And we'll see what happens in the further court filings to see if there is some kind of motion to compel information on the IGG. But as of now, it seems that they did comply. They've represented that in this document. That doesn't mean they did, but they're representing that they did. So that's what I was able to find. And as far as any updated documents, I haven't looked at those. So this is just as of the time that the discovery was due. All this discovery was due on September 4th. That was a deadline. And that's what the judge was asking about when he asked, has the prosecution complied with submitting everything? And then we got into the how much of it was duplicate and blah, blah, blah. And you know, then that's a whole other story. That was in my last video. So with regard to the DNA, so far, we have yet to see what, if anything, Ann Taylor might say about their statement that they've produced everything. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about is the legal representation of Brian Kohberger. And it's interesting because at the last hearing, and I'm going to play the portion of the last hearing where Ann Taylor was asking about the contract that she is supposed to have, her team is supposed to have with the state in regards to representing Brian Kohberger. So I'm just going to play it and then I'll talk about it.
As the court is very well aware, the system of delivering public defense is changing next week. As appointed counsel in the case, I do not have a contract yet. Nobody on my team is under contract for this case. I'm concerned about what that means, and I thought the court should be aware. Further, we have been able to access funding to help us prepare this case through Idaho Criminal Rule 12.2. At the current time, we're working with about 25 experts and investigators to prepare the case. I don't know if 12.2 will continue to be the way to get funding for those experts and investigators, or if that's changing. And I thought the court should know those things. Thank you.
Thank you. So I am hopeful that Mr. Fredrickson will ensure that the contract is available for you and your team next week. I have no control over that, of course, other than to, as it relates to who I permit to withdraw from this case or not withdraw from this case. As to 12.2 funding, my understanding is, and I've had a discussion with Judge Munson, who has been serving, as I understand it, as what we refer to as the money judge. I've asked him to remain in that capacity at least through the transition to the state public defense system in next week on October 1. My understanding is, and perhaps I will come to find out something different, but that once it goes to that system 12.2 as it relates to public defense funded attorneys on contract seeking 12.2 funding, that's no longer a thing. That would come through the state public defense budget, essentially. I guess we'll find out if that becomes a problem down the road, but that's my understanding, is that whole system that 12.2 is based upon is coming to an end. So, given your statement about the trial date.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to share with you guys about the status of representation with regard to Kohberger. Now, here's the thing. You know, there is a hearing set, I believe, for November 8th. You can check the docket. I think it's November 8th. and it's a closed hearing, and notice was given in by way of an order that stated that Ann Taylor and her team continue to represent Mr. Kohberger. And so the judge is well within his rights to, like he said, he has the ability to permit attorneys to withdraw or not permit them to withdraw. So because it seems that there's no contract with with the public defender, appointed public defender, Ann Taylor and her team, and Brian Kohberger, it seems that the judge made that order to continue having them represent Mr. Kohberger despite the fact that there's no contract yet. That's at least what it sounds like to me. I could be wrong, but that's what it sounds like to me. And so in regards to the funding, once the contract is in place, then the funding comes from the state. So in order to access funding, I understand it, that contract between the appointed public defenders and the state has to be in place. So the judge set a hearing, but it's a closed hearing. And it's interesting because I don't understand why it's closed. There may be a reason why it's a closed hearing, but this is not evidence. Okay, so the gag order covers evidence in the case, certain evidence, not all of it, just certain evidence. Most of the evidence, I guess, unless they decide to make it public. So I'm not sure why the judge is ordering this to be a closed session. And he's also ordering Fredrickson, I believe that's the person in charge of the contracts. He's ordering Fredrickson to appear at that hearing as well. So being that this is a public issue in terms of where funding comes from in the contract in order for the appointed public defenders to get paid, I'm not sure why it's a closed session. And I'm not sure even if the judge has the authority to do anything because he said himself, it's beyond my control. But in any event, he set the closed hearing, and it was set by way of an order that Ann Taylor and her team would be representing Brian Kohberger, are still ordered to represent Brian Kohberger. And probably what he wants is a status on what's going on. And, I don't know what's going to happen at that closed hearing, but certainly this is probably just a bunch of red tape that they need to go through, hopefully. Hopefully it's not anything sinister or anything out of the ordinary, but this is an interesting twist to this case. So I'm going to keep tabs on it, and I'm going to do a little bit of research because I really don't know how all this works, except that the public defender's representation has moved to the state funding. And so this is kind of an interesting topic. And, imagine if you're Brian Kohberger and you don't know if there's going to be funding for your representation or there's no contract. I mean, that could be scary. And also for the families. I mean, if he doesn't have representation, what's going to happen? He has to look for representation, and then there'll be further delays. But I don't think that's going to happen. I hope not. So it's a bad thing all the way around if this is red tape and they can't get through it, But we'll see what happens. Hopefully it'll work out. And I just don't know why this hearing would be sealed. If anybody knows or has any information, let me know in the comments. I want to learn. I certainly don't know Idaho law, but I know law and evidence, and I know that the gag order covers evidence. So in terms of hearings, whenever there's an evidentiary hearing or a hearing involving evidence in the case, then I can see why it would be closed, why certain things would be closed, certain evidentiary things. But in any event, I'm going to look into it. If anybody knows anything about how that works and why it's sealed, why it's a closed hearing, let me know. Anyway, I'll see you guys on the next time.